Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some PathOfExile 1 discussion. Welcome to day 11 of Teaser season for patch 3.26, Secrets of the Atlas. Secrets indeed, because there's going to be a number of things that are hidden in Grinding Gear Games' teaser video that they put out today that I want to go into in this video. In particular, this screenshot that you can see now. Click to travel to Kingsmarch. So yesterday we discussed the question of the tooltip for gold. There was one single frame in yesterday's Grinding Gear Games video where they showcased the new tooltip for gold. The 3.25 text is used as a currency in Kingsmarch. The 3.26 text can be used to purchase items from vendors. Now, it was interesting, in my comment section, I noticed that there were a lot of people really happy at the site that Kingsmarch was conceivably going away, and there were also a number of people that were really sad about it. However, the answer is we still don't really know exactly what's happening. It will exist in the game in some form, but it doesn't seem like there's as much of a reference to it when it comes to what gold is. So where yesterday I thought, oh, Kingsmarch is probably not going core, or maybe they're just keeping it around as a hub. Now I'm thinking maybe the hub outcome is more likely. Maybe this is going to be somewhere that replaces the Karui Shores, the role that's played in the endgame, or maybe Grinding Gear Games have got some sort of other vision for it instead. I would, however, be surprised if recombination stays because it was just so dominating of other forms of crafting. And also I would be surprised if shipments and farms stay. Mostly because the people didn't like Kingsmarch. The thing that those people didn't like was the pressure to always have gold in order to keep the farmers running. I think it could be interesting though if Kingsmarch lost the gold, but if you still could come across metal ore deposits, and then you could send off through the existing shipping interface various shipments that are just metals. That could be interesting at various points in the game. I guess we'll find out exactly what they do. We'll probably get more information on that tomorrow. So that is discussion of the covert teasers that are hidden in this, but we have some overt ones. Oh, have a look at that. That is a stack of 28 splinters of ash. What happened here? This player fought an entire breach, and then at the moment that the breach event completely ended, at the player's feet, all of the accumulator's splinters dropped. Now, I don't know exactly how this will work in multiplayer. It'll probably split it so that at each player that's within 15 meters of where the breach started, there'll be some number of splinters that drop at their feet. I don't know all of the other interactions, like what happens if you're running a breach and then halfway through it you die. All those sorts of things we'll have to find out, but the core quality of life here is substantial. This is something PathOfExile 2 did first, and that is coming to PathOfExile 1. The second quality of life change is something that is primarily for controller players. In fact, it is solely for controller players. This is going to be a change in the way that you target interactables in the world. So things like the nests you have to hit in the mudflats, or heist smugglers' caches when you're running maps, all sorts of things along those lines. The current status quo is that there is one button for targeting, and this is either target item or target monster, and the game will assume that you want to target monster if there's any ambiguity involved, which is probably the better way to have it, but it is still a real problem. This is going to split out now, so there will be two different buttons, one for target item and one for target monster. So if you don't really want to kill those monsters in that heist and you want to just instead open the chest, you should be easier able to do that. I think that's going to be more significant in heist than it is anywhere else. The next quality of life change was something that we had already discussed on this channel because it had been sort of snuck into a couple of videos, hadn't got its own video from Grinding Gear Games. That is that currency items, when you right click them, the items that they can be used upon will receive a subtle highlight to make it a little bit easier to see. And next we have a tale of two frames. On this frame, the player is alive. Their XP bar is reading 50.5%. On the next frame, or actually it takes 2 frames for the death to actually register, this frame, they still have 50.5%. What's going on here? This is a change that's being made exclusively to Pinnacle boss fights that take place solely in an arena. So this is not going to apply presumably to Cortex, because the Cortex, whilst the Pinnacle boss fight against Venarius takes place in an arena, the rest of the zone has a bunch of other things going on in there. There's trash clearing to be done, all sorts of fun and games there. Likewise, I don't think this is going to apply to Atsuri and the Alluring Abyss, a couple other places. But against pure boss fights where there's nothing else in the zone, your XP will be locked in there. If you do happen to go splat like this, you're not going to lose any XP. This is going to be absolutely fantastic for learning bosses, especially if you're in a situation where you're like level 97, 98, 99, where getting to the next level is a substantial amount of time investment. At that point, it's going to be a huge improvement to not have to defer running various Pinnacle content. One of the problems though, this is not going to apply to some other difficult fights, so tier 17 map bosses. I don't think it's going to apply to Maven's Invitations, so Maven's Invitation, the Feared and similar, but it is going to be something that will be pretty significant in the places it applies to. That said, it's still best to try not to go splat, because going splat is still unpleasant. Ultimately, you want to get to the point that you can beat the bosses without it, but while you're learning, it's perfectly fine to go splat a few times. Now, next we get to the vendor window changes. There are two of these, and they relate to the search interface. So one of these applies both to vendor windows and also to your stash. One of them is vendor window exclusive. What happens when you're talking to a vendor and you put a particular search term into their highlight items window? If you do this, that vendor will remember until you log out of the game. There's a limitation to this. It won't transfer from one vendor to another. And again, it will be forgotten when you log out. Where I think this will be useful is for people who are trying to get faster early in the acts, particularly for the early acts, and also it'll be really useful for people who like playing around with Gwenin. But this change is the smaller part of the changes to the search bars. The bigger part, which is going to have a lot more applications, is that now the regex limit is 250 characters. And I did mention there was something hidden in here as well. It's interesting that the way that the mouse is controlled by the Grinding Games staff member that's recording this video, they're very careful to go around this square. Or at least they are the first time. But the second time, there are 3 frames where they do end up clipping. The mouse goes onto one of the items, and we get to see this. And you can see here, cost 2 orbs of transmutation. So, early in the game, vendors are still going to require transmutations and other currency items, rather than requiring gold. We'll have to find out their plans for gold tomorrow in the main live stream announcement, because currently they are making things as cryptic as possible, with some hints that are pointing towards vendors taking over it and some hints pointing towards the status quo. Now, there are 2 other little changes that are coming up as well. There's going to be a new button added in guilds to hide offline members, and there's also going to be a quality of life improvement, and this is a big one, to traveling to the Rogue Harbour. Once you've been there once, you don't need to spend a rogue marker every time you want to go there. It's just added to your waypoint as normal. Now, this isn't something that's going to have a big impact on the cost of rogue markers, because it's a trivial amount of them that are used to travel there, but it is going to mean that trading with someone who is in a heist area is going to be much less of a hassle than it is presently. Anyways, those are all the quality of life changes that have been announced so far. The biggest one, the one that excites me the most in this slot, is the breach condensation of splinters. That is going to have a bit of an impact on breach's profitability overall, but where a lot of people are thinking immediately, oh, that's going to make breach more lucrative than it's been before, I actually think it's going to be the reverse. This is going to make breach more pleasant to engage with, and when a mechanic becomes more pleasant to engage with, there's more supply of the resources that it creates, and there's also more demand for the scarabs that it uses. For that reason, I actually think this might be a nerf to the profitability of breach, because it's simply more fun to engage with, and that means that people are more willing to tolerate it than they were previously. Anyways, I'm going to leave it there. I will see you for the live stream tomorrow, and I'm also planning to put together a little bit of a fun video in the interim with some predictions on nerfs and buffs. We'll see how right and how wrong they are when the patch notes come out, which is hopefully tomorrow.